short stories and excerpts of novels. And this week's short story is Meeting with Someone Unknown. Enjoy.
My name is Walter Zimmerman. I'm 24 and living the most monotonous life possible. This night was not different from others. They always ended the same way, lying in bed in my small house browsing the internet on my tablet. They were lonely nights, from YouTube videos to Instagram. Just as they're lonely, they're unfulfilling, and I feel that something is missing from my life. It's already menial enough with a cashiering job at the supermarket, a one-story home on St. Wolfgang, which is 40 kilometers east of Munich. It's the same house I've been stuck in since I moved out to my parents a few years back. It also doesn't help matters that I dropped out of college second semester of sophomore year either. The crux of my problem lies in that I haven't had a stable or meaningful relationship in a few months now. I even have a nightly ritual. I open up Tinder and browse various profiles. Some were hotter than others, but no matter the appearance, I couldn't find their profiles that seemed a good match to me. The ones that do typically live far away. I've been doubtful that someone could be with me outside of comment sections. I've had relationships, but they never last outside of the fourth date or so. I've grown ready for a truly meaningful relationship. The problem is that most people on Tinder aren't. Most never reply, and others probably bypass on my profile. Unlike most lonely nights, a lady not only liked my profile, but replied as well. Her name is Julia Grünwald. A beautiful face as well as a beautiful name to boot. I thought it was too good to be true at first, and probably one of those dating website scammers. After commenting with her, I discovered that A, she lives in the same town as me, and B, we seem to have so much in common. I told her my situation, hobbies, and interests. A few comments later, she wants to meet with me in real life. I was still skeptical. After all, her Tinder profile picture could easily be a stock photo pulled out of a magazine or something. I said yes to meeting her in real life and told her to meet me at the pizzeria at 20 after 5, around the time I get off work. She agreed, and I happily went to sleep that night. The next morning, the job went on as usual. Slow mornings and all sorts of interesting characters. During my lunch break, a coworker, Megan, tapped my shoulder and asked, "You seem dazed. Is something wrong?" Surprised, I said, "I met this girl on Tinder and we are meeting in real life today." Megan said, "And she wouldn't end up like Phoebe, right?" And I responded, No, this time is different. She seems to be my type, and we also have a lot in common." Megan face-palmed and groaned. "Alright, but don't come crying to me when you guys break up. Just face it, Walter. You're a lost cause." As much as I wanted to argue, I knew that she was right. I want me and Julia to potentially get along, but with my luck, it's very real that I could die a lonely man. After resuming the second half of my shift, dealing with the afternoon rush while baggers put items in bags in a tedious form of lattice work, I was overjoyed when I got off the clock. I looked at my phone and the clock said 17 o'clock, and instead of going home like normal, I drove to Irmul to go to the pizzeria that I told Julia to meet me at. It isn't a long drive, only taking a few minutes. To my luck, the place was closed, so I had some time to get ready in my car. I took a comb out of the glove box, tilted the visor, and opened the mirror to comb my thick and formerly unkempt hair to avoid the appearance of bedhead. I also sprayed deodorant on my armpits, not too much as to have an overpowering scent, but not too little as to still have the BO still be present. I ate a breast mint as I hadn't brushed in a while. After I got ready, all I could do was put the visor back in its regular position, get out of the car, and wait in front for Julia to show up. I then admired the scenery for a few moments. A patch of pine trees alongside fields, a large sunset, as well as a small cottage just across the street. I stared at the scenery for a good 10 minutes while waiting for my blind date, when suddenly a Volvo with a dinged up front bumper pulled up and parked in the parking lot in front of the pizzeria. The Volvo's engine stopped, and out came a beautiful woman with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. The same face that I saw on Tinder was here and walking toward me. I was naturally flustered because I'm trying to savor her beauty whilst also trying to be socially astute. Yulia then introduced herself with a simple hello. Flustered, I responded, hello yourself. She giggled, and I laughed a little. There was a good minute of awkward silence. I was so far removed from reality that I totally forgot where I was when she asked, when is it gonna open? With that saying, I was brought back into reality, and I then said, I'll check. So I walked up to the door, and there was a sign that says, open from 30 after 11 to 30 after 14, and 30 after 15 to 23 o'clock. I looked at my phone and said, it's open in about 5 minutes. There was more awkward silence. We almost had nothing to talk about. I could tell that we were both fixated on making a first impression. Even if we stood around awkwardly before the pizzeria opened, and a couple minutes late at that, we walked in and the host welcomed us by saying, how many will there be tonight? 2, Yulia said. And the waiter then said, indoor or outdoor? I said, outdoor. The waiter directed us to our outdoor table and said, your server would be with you shortly. Thanks, Yulia said. Now we started becoming more talkative. What toppings do you like on your pizza? Yulia asked, and I replied, pepperoni and tuna. Tuna? Yulia said with a slight cringe, and I casually replied, what? And Yulia said, that's a very strange pizza topping. To that I said, well, what are your choice of toppings? And she said, sausage and mushrooms. I gasped, for I never really understood how people could have such an unusual thing for a topping. Yulia said, what? I laughed a little and said, that's a strange topping, mushrooms. And then Yulia jokingly said, shut up. And I said, no, I'm serious. Yulia then said with a laugh, get out of here. We both laughed and we looked at each other lovingly and longingly. That was until the waiter came and asked, hi, may I get you a drink? Both of us fell silent until Yulia said, I'll have a Coke, please. And I said, I'll have some Splissy. The waiter asked, and are you ready to order? I responded, oh, I'll take a small pizza with pepperoni and tuna. The waiter politely said, tuna? And Yulia laughed at me and said, see, I told you tuna's a crazy topping. While laughing, he turned to Yulia and said, and you? Yulia ordered, I'll have a small with mushrooms and sausage. That's a very good topping. Unlike tuna, the waiter said as he winced at me in a trollish way, making Yulia laugh, and then he left us to each other after he took our menus. What a smartass, I complained, and Yulia said, I think he's funny. I said, I think he should get fired. We both laughed, and I decided to start up a new conversation. Say, what are some of your hobbies? I asked. Yulia said, oh, I like hiking, playing video games, and Instagramming. You? And I said, oh, I like gaming, YouTubing, and fishing, I guess. And then we laughed, and after talking in depth about what games we like to play, our workplaces, she works as a cleric in City Hall, we talked about other petty things like the sunset and daylight savings until our pizza came. Here you go, the waiter said as he handed Yulia her pizza. Here's your crazy pizza, he said as he handed me mine. Enjoy, the waiter said as he eyeballed me. We ate our pizza, and I said after I gobbled my second slice, I dare you to try this tuna pizza. Yulia then looked at me and with a challenging gaze and said, okay, if I eat your pizza, you have to eat mine. Feeling cocky, I said, challenge accepted. So I took a slice of Yulia's mushroom pizza, and she took a slice of my tuna pizza. I playfully said, it has fungus growing on it. Yulia then said, "Eat it, chicken!" She first watched me eat the mushroom pizza, so mushrooms were sin, and when I ate the pizza, it actually didn't taste all that bad. It perfectly complemented the taste, actually. I loved it, but nonchalantly said, "Not that bad. Now let's see you do it." Yulia had a look of disgust, but was clearly trying to hide it. She first nibbled the tip of pizza, which only had a lone piece of pepperoni on it. It was inevitable. She had to eat the chunks of tuna. She took a regular bite of it, and she had a blatant look of disgust as she had the piece of pizza in her mouth. She chewed it a little, but was now starting to look as though she's going to spit it out. She eventually drank a bit of her soda and uncomfortably swallowed it. "Well," I said. But then she said, "Oh my god, that was so disgusting. It was like salty and gross." I snickered a little and said, "So is the tuna going back upstream now?" And she put her hand on my shoulder in a playful fashion and said, "Shut up!" As the sun went down, we continued eating and just being with each other. Then the bill came and she asked, "Are you gonna pay the bill?" I faltered a little, and in spite of only making €9 an hour, I said yes. Opened the check, and accounting for the IVA, it came to €24.01. I worked a good 3 hours for this date, but at this point I kinda had to pay, because after all, I made her eat my strange taste of toppings. Even took a picture of the bit slice, presumably to post it on Instagram. I used the only €20 bill that I had in my wallet and placed a €5 bill in there. The waiter came and took it. Now all we could do is wait for the change. I was mesmerized by the scene. My new date was here and she subtly glistened in the full moon. I couldn't keep it in my head, so I said, "You're kind of pretty in the moonlight." She giggled and said, "You're just saying that." I romantically said, "But I mean it." She was outright flattered. I could tell, too. As the change came back, I said, "Well, it was nice talking with you." We walked out and I said, "Can I have your number?" Yulia looked at me and said, "You know what? I'll give you my number and maybe we could plan something next weekend." She showed me her phone number. I typed it in and saved it in my contacts list. We said our goodbyes, and I have new hope for my love life yet again. I saw her car drive away, and I waited a few moments for another car or two to pass by. I didn't really want to seem like a stalker after all. When I got home, all I could think of is how lucky I am to have the right girl in my life. She occupied my mind from my Netflix watch list to my copy of Uncharted, and even my YouTube viewing. It was nothing but looking forward to Yulia. This week passed by like a blur, and it seems like the exact same things happened every day that week. With the exception of Wednesday, I got a text from Yulia that read, "Do you want to go to the kino sometime?" I'm working on the weekdays, so I texted back, "Saturday?" After a good minute, she texted back, "Yes." And I texted back, "When do you want me to pick you up?" After an additional 20 minutes, she said, "I'll check movie times and then I'll text you back tomorrow," and sent back a smiley face emoji. I've lived in this house for a good 3 years, but ever since I started dating Yulia, strange things have been happening. For instance, on the night of our first date, and every other weekday now that I think of it, there are these annoying dogs that bark and howl. I could hear it from my bedroom too. It's been happening every night at almost the same time. I've never really read too much into it. I just think that maybe some neighbors a few houses down got some new dogs, and those dogs aren't used to being in a new area. It wasn't until Thursday when she texted me, "Star Wars maybe?" And I replied with a thumbs up emoji and replied, "Pick me up on Saturday at 30 after 6. She texted me her home address and I replied, "Okay, I'll be there." It couldn't work out much better. I have weekends off. I spent Saturday morning playing video games and Saturday afternoon getting ready. combing my hair, brushing my teeth, washing my face, and lastly, eating the mint-flavored chewing gum. My car isn't all that nice, a blue 1995 Volkswagen Vento, but it gets the job done. There are a few holes in the upholstery and other odds and ends, but I'm sure Yulia won't mind. I put Yulia's address into my phone, and I was directed to a dingy-looking one-story house. Some paint was peeling off, smells of urine, and just all around gross. After a couple of minutes, I texted, "You ready?" And she replied, "I'm just brushing my hair. I'll be out in a couple minutes." I replied, "KK," and put my phone into sleep mode. I was just fixated on how bad the place looked. I also recalled her car's front bumper was dinged up. All I could think is, what am I getting myself into? After a few minutes, she came out and got into the passenger seat of my car. I was still thinking of the repugnant smell of her house. So after we greeted each other, I asked, "What's with the smell?" Yulia had an expression of embarrassment, shuddered a little, and said, "Sorry, my septic is backed up." I asked, "Why don't you call a plumber?" And she explained, "I just don't have that kind of money right now." I then asked, "So what film are we gonna go see?" And she said, "I texted you a few days ago, silly." And I said, "I guess I forgot then. Could you remind me?" She responded, "Star Wars, The Force Awakens." The prequel straight up killed Star Wars for me. I even recall a lot of people on Hotmail back in the day kept spoiling episode 2 and 3 in intimate detail. I humorously said, "I'm kinda skeptical. The prequels were crap, and people kept spoiling them back in the chat room days." She laughed and said, "Lol." I asked, "So where and what time?" Yulia responded, "It'll be playing at 7 o'clock. It's at the Eskino in Dauphin." I cringed a bit, as that's where I'd always go for a second date. I nervously said, "Yes," as now I was scared. Every faulty relationship I had since moving here, I'd always end up taking them to that very kino. Yulia asked, "What's wrong? You seem tense." I was not about to tell her about my past relationships. I didn't want her to feel insecure or anything, but it still slipped out. In my previous relationships, I kind of always wound up going to the kino on the second date. This was when I was expecting a fight with her to attack me with all sorts of personal insecurities. She said, "Don't worry, it's only an odd coincidence." Reassured, I started the car and took her to the kino, but still had her dented front bumper on the brain, so I politely asked, "I remember seeing a large dent on your car the other day. What happened?" Yulia looked somewhat glazed over and said, "I'm just a reckless driver." It was satisfactory, but a strange response, and I never brought it up for the rest of the date. We got to Dauphin after a good 13 minutes of driving. Dauphin is a small city with nearly everything. Cafes, pubs, banks, and homes aplenty. Most available parking spots were taken up. I was just lucky enough to grab a spot just on the other side of the kino. The queue was friggin' huge. It went out of the queue boundaries down the sidewalk, just barely blocking the entrance to some apartments. I tried making small talk as I turned the engine off. "My, that's an awfully long line at the kino." Yulia asked, "I read that the movie time is 7 o'clock, but is Star Wars worth standing in that long queue?" To that I replied, "Well, a part of me wants to get back at all the people who spoiled the movies, but I also don't want to be stuck in the very front." Yulia replied, "We can get in the line, and if it's sold out, we can always just shop around." Yulia was right, so we walked across the street. It was a good while waiting outside in 4-degree weather. We had jackets on, but it was absolutely cold, and it was a slow-moving queue as well. After a good 20 minutes, we finally got in the queue boundaries, but Yulia said, "I have to pee. Can you hold my spot?" I said, "Sure," and she got out of the queue and proceeded to walk down the street. Strangely enough, the queue suddenly became faster in the queue boundaries, and by the time she came back, I was almost at the box office. She came back, and some guy who was behind complained, "Hey, you cut!" Almost as if I was defending Yulia, I said, "She's with me. I was saving her spot in the queue." And he just backed off. Yeah, it was small, but the encounter somehow made me feel grand. When we got to the box office, Yulia said, "That'll be 2 for Star Wars," and the cashier said, "That'll be €9." She simply gave him 2 5-euro notes and in response gave her our tickets, a €1 coin for the change, and politely said, "Enjoy the show." While inside the kino, she said, "I'll go get us a seat and you go get us popcorn and snacks, okay?" I agreed, and she went into Kino 5, and I had to stand in yet another sizably long queue for snacks. About 10 minutes and €6 later, I stumbled into Kino 5 with a medium thing of popcorn and drinks. The trailers didn't even start when I walked in. Yulia then beckoned me from what have got to be the worst seats in the whole kino. "Walter!" If I didn't have so much stuff in my arms, I would have facepalmed. I got down to the front. Our seats were square in front of the screen and a good 2 meters away from it. I sat down and handed Yulia her drink while I put mine in the drink holder and said, "These have got to be the worst seats you could get." Yulia replied, "This is a packed house. These were the only 2 seats that weren't taken." The kino was really crowded. When I looked back, I couldn't see anything except scores of people looking back at me. 55 minutes after the film started, the neck pain was driving me insane. I could barely get any popcorn in my mouth. It was awful. But out of nowhere, I feel a hand reach over my shoulder and dance down my body. The hand was Yulia's. She had me in a partial headlock. In response, I tilted my head down. I couldn't see the movie, but didn't want to ruin this intimate moment. We looked at each other, leaned in, and finally locked lips. The bad seats were a blessing in disguise because although people heard us make out, they couldn't actually see us because their heads were pointed up at the screen. After we walked out of the movie, which was a great one by the way, we swore stuff away, rubbed our necks, and did some small talk on the way back to the car. "That was a long one," Yulia said. To that I replied, "It just felt longer because of the neck pain." Yulia then humorously recalled, "I wonder if there's gonna be a long line out there." I remained silent and rolled my head around to get the nagging dull pain out. When we walked out, the queue was slightly shorter but still going outside of the queue boundaries, and around 10 to 12 people were queued up down the sidewalk. It was nightfall and my phone says 25 after 9. After Yulia told me what her favorite part was, I said, "Mine was that move you did on me." After we crossed the street, I saw something on my windshield wipers. That something was a parking ticket with a €15 fine. I said, "Well, there's a surprise." Yulia, with a slight humoring tone, said, "Well, I guess I should have double-checked the time then." I bitterly replied, "Yeah, I know," as I grabbed the parking ticket off of the windshield, unlocked the car, opened up the door, and got the expired parking disc off of my dash and onto the sidewalk. I got in the car and reached over to unlock Yulia's side. She got in, and I decided to try my luck. "Oh, wanna come to my place and, use the force?" She said, "Yeah, maybe tomorrow, but sure as hell not tonight." I playfully said as I drove her home, "Yeah, right back to your pissy home." She was silent and slightly embarrassed. It was a silent drive back, not because she was mad, but because we really didn't have a whole lot to talk about other than small talk. When I dropped her off, I said, "Well, have a good night," and she coldly walked into the house. Driving home, I was paranoid that she was mad at me, but after those cringe-worthy pickup lines, I'd want to break up with me. At home, I spent the night ranting and projecting my insecurities online. Most people told me in the most callous way, while a few consoled me. I wouldn't say it was the most depressing night I had. I get like this every time I get paranoid that the relationship isn't working well. I found myself pacing around my room in a familiar sinking pattern of insecurities. At around 11 o'clock, I was even asking myself in the reflection of my sliding door, should I go gay if things with Yulia don't work out? I mean, after all, I've always been more socially secure around other men.
This is my first Tonstad story time, so your feedback is of the utmost importance. And there is an annotation link as well as a link in the description to my Wattpad, so that way you can read the text for yourself. So, what did you like? What didn't you like? Please let me know in the comments. Oh, and by the way, the intro and outro music is the love theme from St. Elmo's Fire, as composed by David Foster. Props to him. I do not own this track, or whatever. I don't even think they'd even care about it, since it's a love theme from an old 80s flick. Oh, screw it. I'll just sign off. This is Tonstad 39, over and out.